Welcome back to Flip the Tables. This week we are breaking down the difference between peacekeeping and peacemaking, because there is a clear line in the sand when it comes down to it. Even when mentioning this in conversations, I get a lot of responses not knowing that there's even a difference, when they are very, very different. But before I get into it, I will start with this, saying that this is going to be one of my favorite episodes. The subject, principle, virtue, however you feel led to describe it within love leadership is a non-negotiable and one that I'm very passionate about. Making the choice to be a peacemaker over a peacekeeper is not only beneficial for your leadership and your team, but for so many others without you even realizing it. So let's start with a confession. Much of what gets called peace in leadership is just conflict avoidance with a logo. Silence, politeness, smile, and move on. Guess what? That's not peace. That's trying to be a peacekeeper, which is the opposite of what Jesus was. Luke 12:51 tells us, "Do you think that I came here to bring peace on earth? No, I tell you, but rather division." That verse alone ruins leadership strategies. Johann Galton, one of the most influential scholars in peace research, proposed that efforts in peace operate at different levels: peacekeeping, peacemaking, and peace building. Now we're only going to focus on the first two. Galton's framework is foundational in the field of conflict transformation, arguing that peacekeeping alone cannot create lasting peace because it does not address the structural or relational causes of conflict. Peacekeeping focuses only on containing and stabilizing, whereas peacemaking focuses on resolving, negotiating, and reconciliation. Now let's jump back to Ronald Hafett's adaptive leadership framework, where it argues that avoiding conflict actually prevents growth. Leadership who suppress tension delay necessary change and often deepen the dysfunction. Translation: if your leadership goal is no one gets upset, congratulations, you have successfully stalled maturity. And Jesus never did that. Now, peacekeeping is obsessed with comfort, prioritizing harmony over honesty, calm over clarity, appearance over transformation. Peacekeepers just don't want tension. Peacemakers, now they're not afraid of it. Peacekeeping eventually will collapse because unspoken issues continue to grow, resentment simmers, and trust erodes quietly and quickly. Edmondson's research on psychological safety shows us that environments where people fear speaking up experience lower performance and higher burnout. That's when your people start leaving, silently. Now, love-centered leadership refuses that outcome. Pulling from 1 John 4:18 again, perfect love drives out fear. Adam Curl focused his work on peacemaking, restoring relational health in 1971, where he stated within his research, peacemaking involves the transformation of human relationships from those characterized by hostility and distress to those characterized by understanding and cooperation. And that's exactly where love leadership lives, right in the middle of messy relationships where truth and love work together to create real change. Now, Kenneth Thomas and Ralph Kilman, conflict management researchers, stated that effective conflict management requires addressing the underlying interest rather than suppressing disagreement. Well, if it's not clear yet, I hope by the end of this episode it will be. Peacekeeping is the easy way out, and a lot of times the wrong way, doing both yourself and others a crazy disservice. Peacemaking, on the other hand, is making strides to truly move forward within our leadership, relationships, etc., as Jesus intended us to do. Here is where leadership theory and theology shake hands. Love is the difference between peacekeepers and peacemakers. Now, don't get me wrong, I know some fabulous leaders that lean on the peacekeeper side of the scale, and their heart is in the right place, and I know that they are full of love. But that doesn't always mean they are right. Patrick Lencioni's work on organizational health argues that trust-based teams engage in productive conflict. Healthy disagreements, when rooted in mutual respect, strengthens alignment. Translation: love makes disagreement safe. I've always said that we can disagree and still be friends, solid coworkers, and so on, if we're on the same page for the mission. Now, peacekeeping says, don't rock the boat. But peacemaking says, let's fix the leak. James lays it out again in chapter 3, verses 17. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peace-loving, gentle, compliant, full of mercy and good fruits. Notice what comes first: purity and truth, not comfort. Peace that skips over truth is not biblical. It's spiritualized denial. Now let's be clear. Jesus made peace by telling the truth. He did not avoid conflict to keep people comfortable. He entered conflict to make people whole. He confronted hypocrisy. He challenged religious leaders. He disrupted systems that benefited the powerful and crushed the vulnerable. And he did it not from ego, but from love. Paul reminds us of this in Ephesians 4:15. Speaking the truth in love, let us grow in every way into him who is the head, Christ. Side note, this means the actual truth, not the truth that you've made up in your head and wrapping it up as peacemaking. But most strongly rooted Christian leaders will be able to tell the difference. So stay prayed up. Now remember, peacekeeping avoids truth. Peacemaking requires it. If truth threatens your peace was never rooted in love. Peacekeeping often exists to protect leadership authority, reputations, or stability of organizations. Now, peacemaking exists to protect people. John Carter's change leadership research shows that real transformation creates discomfort before it creates clarity. Leaders who rush to calm tensions undermine trust. Now, peacekeeping leadership is broken down like this: avoids confrontation, maintains surface harmony, and often suppresses real issues. Peacemaking leadership is broken down like this: engages conflict constructively, encourages truth and reconciliation, produces stronger teams and healthier cultures. Peacemaking aligns closely with how love leadership functions, if you remember snippets from last week. Now we're quoting the good old KJV for this one. Matthew 5:9 reads, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." Not peacekeepers, not conflict avoiders, but peacemakers. A word that implies effort, risk, and sometimes discomfort. And yes, it means some leaders will be uncomfortable. That's not failure, that's formation. Peacekeeping is easy. You don't have to prepare. You don't have to listen deeply. And you don't have to confront your own fear of being disliked. Peacemaking, that takes strong love, humility, and emotional maturity. You will be the minority in the room. Daniel Goleman's work on emotional intelligence, remember him? He highlighted that leaders who manage tension without shutting down or lashing out are far more effective long term. Jesus modeled this constantly: calm in the chaos, steady under pressure, unmoved by manipulation. That last one is good. Unmoved by manipulation, unmoved by fear, ego, narcissistic control. John 14:27 tells us in the red letters, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give you as the world gives. Don't let your heart be troubled or fearful." That verse, those words, along with Matthew 5:9, should be enough to give leaders or anyone really the courage to truly stand up as peacemakers in a world of go along to get along. Jesus didn't give peace that numbs. He gives peace that sustains. Peacemaking stories flood the scripture. In Matthew 23:27 through 28, we see Jesus publicly confronted hypocrisy. Nehemiah 5:6 through 12, Nehemiah gets angry, but channels it toward justice and restoration, not personal dominance. And in Galatians 2:11 through 14, Paul confronted Peter openly when his behavior harmed others. Love doesn't protect leaders from accountability. Now, we can't leave out where we find peacekeeping within the scripture, but their outcomes were quite different. In 1 Samuel 2 through 4, the story of Eli, where he knew how terrible his sons were being, and just gave them a mild little slap on the wrist, but never truly held them accountable. What was the outcome? God judged his household. In Matthew 27 and John 18 through 19, it is clear that Pontius Pilate knew Jesus was innocent, and even stated in John 18:38, "I find no guilt in him." Yet the crowd kept pushing, and well, we all know the outcome. The leadership lesson here is Pilate chose to publicly be stable over moral courage. And there are more and more stories within the scripture where peacekeeping just doesn't end well. It comes down to biblical peacemaking being disruptive, uncomfortable, and necessary. And well, peacekeeping is just not. Another little story time before we pop over to the closing of this episode. Resolutions. Most of us make them at the beginning of every year. And it wasn't until recently that I learned that some people choose a word for their life, not necessarily a list of goals that they were going to achieve. And so I decided to go the word route this year, and I bet you're picking up on what word I chose. Peacemaker. To be a peacemaker, no longer a peacekeeper, because I have firsthand experienced the difference not only in my personal life through growing up, but professionally, and well, I'm just fed up with it. Sitting around tables within conversations, knowing that someone needed to speak up and just not care if someone's feelings was hurt because the truth needed to be shared. And I'm one that hasn't spoke up in the past, and I just decided that I was done with it. I made Peacemaker my word in 2026, and I intend to do just that. To not sit at tables, to not listen to conversations, and not speak up when it's warranted. As leaders, and I mean even as simple as being Christians, we should not be operating to where we are more concerned about the feelings of someone not being hurt than the mission and vision in which we are working toward, the one that God has laid out before us. So let's stop calling silence peace. Stop confusing calm with help. Stop protecting systems and even people at the expense of other people. Jesus didn't die to keep the peace. He lived, he loved, and he led to make it. Again, peacemaking is disruptive, uncomfortable, and costly. And peacemaking, that's exactly how Jesus led. Episode number 3. What a whirlwind. I probably shouldn't have already pinpointed a favorite subject, but since it's my word of the year, it's obviously going to be in my top 5. Jesus didn't keep the peace. He made the peace. And sometimes that means hard conversations, flipped tables, and truth spoken in love, which is exactly the foundation of love leadership. And it calls us to do that. Lead with courage, lead with compassion, and commitment to real reconciliation, not surface level harmony. So join us next week, same time, same platforms, as we dive into a subject that may surprise you as a leadership tool: humor. We will also be welcoming our first guest of the season, Dr. John Reams. He has been extremely impactful in my life as a leader and now a mentor, and I'm excited for you all to hear from him and our conversation. You're in for a good listen. Now, I know this episode was a little shorter than normal, but it was sweet, short, and to the point. Exactly how I like to be. No fluff, especially when it comes to being a peacemaker over a peacekeeper. So I hope you join us back here next week, same platforms. This is Flip the Tables. I'm Bethany Brady, and we are leading differently.